Ezekiel chapter 16 opens with a jarring metaphor for Jerusalem's origins, an unwanted infant, abandoned in an open field and left to die in the elements. This image establishes a baseline of historical vulnerability. In verses 3 through 5, the Lord declares, "Thy birth and thy nativity is of the land of Canaan. Thou wast cast out in the open field, to the loathing of thy person, in the day that thou wast born." This establishes Jerusalem's spiritual heritage rather than her physical descent, pointing back to the Israelites' lack of status and crushing bondage in Egypt. The prophet details specific rituals that were withheld from this infant. The umbilical cord was uncut, and the child was neither washed in water, rubbed with salt, nor swaddled. In the ancient world, these steps were meant to cleanse and protect a newborn. Omitting them signifies that Israel lacked any inherent purification or protection from the surrounding pagan culture. Yet, in verse 6, God intervenes, "And when I passed by thee and saw thee polluted in thine own blood, I said unto thee when thou wast in thy blood, Live." This represents God's sovereign choice to redeem Israel from Egyptian bondage, stepping in when no other nation took pity. Israel's survival depended entirely on a divine mandate. Their existence was unearned, independent of political value or military strength or noble lineage. The timeline in Ezekiel's metaphor then shifts. The abandoned infant survives, reaches maturity, and becomes a nation ready for a formal, binding relationship with God. Summarizing verses 8 through 14, God spreads his skirt over her, a covenant symbol of betrothal, and enters into marriage. He washes her, anoints her, and clothes her in gold, silver, and fine linen. This sequence maps directly to the Sinai covenant and the subsequent Golden Age under Kings David and Solomon, where Israel achieved widespread renown. This diagram illustrates how the specific materials mentioned by Ezekiel define that covenant. The fine linen and the badger skins used to clothe the bride map directly to the architectural construction of the tabernacle itself. God literally clothed the nation in the materials of his own dwelling presence. During the era of Solomon, Israel's immense wealth, wisdom, and geopolitical renown were direct physical manifestations of this covenant obedience. The internal spiritual fidelity generated external national security. All of Israel's beauty was a reflection of borrowed divine glory. Left to herself, she had nothing. This dependence sets up the tragedy of her coming arrogance. The narrative shifts from covenant fidelity to spiritual apostasy. Under kings like Ahaz and Manasseh, the nation began an internal collapse. In verses 15 through 21, Ezekiel observes that Israel trusted in her own beauty and played the harlot. They took God's gold to make images of men and sacrificed their own children to pass through the fire. This aligns with the historical record of King Manasseh placing idols directly inside the temple and the nation offering children to Molech in the valley of Hinnom. Ezekiel uses the language of spiritual adultery because in the ancient Near Eastern context, fertility cults mixed literal sexual rites with idol worship. Worshipping Baal or Asherah involved temple prostitution, making the adoption of these gods an explicit violation of the marital covenant with Yahweh. The desecration was systemic. They took the specific gifts God had provided, the gold, silver, fine flour, and oil meant for covenant blessings, and laid them as offerings before pagan statues. Judah's apostasy was an active redirection of God's own resources to fund and worship his rivals. This domestic betrayal soon dictated foreign policy. The biblical prophets viewed political alliances with the same gravity as spiritual prostitution. Trusting in a foreign army required a rejection of the covenant protection of God. In verses 26 through 29, Ezekiel states that Israel committed fornication with the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and multiplied that fornication unto Chaldea. Geopolitical alliances are treated as spiritual adultery. The text first targets the alliance with Egypt. Ignoring the repeated warnings of prophets like Isaiah, Judah continuously sought Egyptian military might to secure their borders, instead of relying on Yahweh. The alliances escalated to Assyria. King Ahaz adopted Assyrian gods, going so far as to build copies of Assyrian altars and install them in Jerusalem to secure military aid from the empire. Finally, this desire for security extended to Chaldea, or Babylonia, completing a trajectory of geopolitical entrapment. Ezekiel points out the bitter irony of this strategy in verses 31 through 34. While nations brought tribute to Solomon during the Golden Age, Judah was now acting contrary to a harlot. Instead of receiving a reward, Judah was paying her lovers. Kings like Hezekiah stripped the temple treasury dry to pay off foreign powers. Judah's geopolitical strategy created a perpetual one-way economic and spiritual deficit. They drained the nation's wealth to purchase favors from the exact foreign empires that would ultimately destroy them. This leads Ezekiel to deliver a shocking moral paradox: the declaration that God's chosen city had become more wicked than universally condemned cities of antiquity. Verses 47 through 52 summarize that Judah multiplied her abominations more than her sisters, Samaria and Sodom. By betraying a superior covenant trust, Judah actually justified the sins of her neighbors by comparison and must now bear her own shame. Ezekiel defines the sins of Sodom as pride, an overabundance of food, idleness, and ignoring the poor. Contrast that with Judah, who actively desecrated the temple of God and sacrificed her own children in pagan fires. The prophets operate on the biblical principle of hypocritical judgment. Judah shuddered at the sins of Samaria and Sodom, yet by committing worse acts, she invited a harsher judgment upon herself. The theological reality is stark. Greater covenant privilege and direct access to the presence of God necessitate a stricter standard of divine judgment. The warnings of the prophets eventually manifested in catastrophic physical reality. The foreign powers Judah trusted turned against her. In verses 35 through 43, God declares he will gather all her lovers against her and strip her naked, break down her high places, and burn her houses with fire. This historically fulfilled in the 586 BC Babylonian siege. The Babylonians completely dismantled the geopolitical and religious infrastructure of Judah, leaving the city bare. Yet God promises to bring again the captivity of Sodom and Samaria, stating that Judah shall return to her former estate alongside them. Placing Judah on a restoration list with Sodom is a radical display of divine mercy meant to shatter Judah's pride. The purpose of this total devastation was corrective. Ultimate restoration requires total humiliation and the public acknowledgement of sin. From the historical ruins of the exile, the narrative shifts focus to the theological promise of the future. In verses 60 through 63, God states, "Nevertheless, I will remember my covenant with thee in the days of thy youth, and I will establish unto thee an everlasting covenant, that thou mayest remember and be confounded." This covenant rests entirely on unmerited, redeeming grace. This cyclical history mirrors the individual's spiritual journey. First, just as Israel was saved by God's choice, humanity is offered baptism. Second, Israel's Babylonian captivity parallels our spiritual slavery to sin. Finally, God's deliverance from exile foreshadows Christ's victory over hell and death. Ezekiel 16 teaches that redemption requires a total abandonment of human prestige or geopolitical strategy. True restoration begins when a people stands humbled before divine grace. This concludes our overview of Ezekiel 16.